EdTech community, and welcome back. If it's your first time here, my name is Rebecca Simons, and this is the channel where we explore all things EdTech. I'm so excited you decided to join us for our August Make and Take session. If you haven't participated in one before, a Make and Take is an interactive time where we'll create something together that you can immediately take and use in your classroom. This month, we're learning how to make a digital flipbook in Google Slides. With school just around the corner, it's the perfect opportunity to think about how you're going to communicate all of that important beginning of the year information with your families and your students. Now, as we all know, great communication sets the foundation for having a successful year, and something like a digital flipbook can play a key role in your communication strategy. Every year at Meet the Teacher, I typically receive some kind of paper version with this information from my son and daughter's teachers. I read it, but inevitably, I will put it somewhere safe or it will get thrown away, and I no longer have access to the information that would have been really useful throughout the year. What I love about this specific project is it's not only an interactive way to communicate important information about your class or the start of school, but it's also digital, which means it's accessible anytime and it can be updated when changes happen throughout the year. So let's jump in and learn how to create one together. Step one is to decide what information you need to share. On slide 2 of your planning guide, I've put together a list of possible suggestions. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. It's simply meant to give you a jump start on brainstorming. There's also a space for you to plan out each layer of your flipbook. For example, in layer 1, I might want to introduce myself and provide my contact information. I'll title this section Mrs. Simons. Planning your content ahead of time is incredibly important because it's going to determine the number of flaps or layers that your digital flipbook is going to have. Now let's discuss how our flipbook is going to look, focusing in on color palette and fonts. If you're struggling to choose a color scheme, there are several great resources out there. I would direct you to coolers.co, Adobe Color Wheel, or Canva's color palette generator. These are all going to be great options. I've provided these links for you on page 3 of your planning guide. You could also do a simple Google search like back to school color palette and browse through the images for inspiration. On slide 3 in your planning guide, you'll find a space to save your color palette for future reference. If you're a fan of using hex codes, you can type those straight into the box, or you can use the eyedropper tool to change the color of each cell. Here's how you can do that. Begin by clicking in the cell you want to change, click the paint bucket icon, click the eyedropper, then select the color you want. You'll want to repeat this process for each of the colors you want to use in your project. There's also a place in the planning guide for you to record which fonts you want to use in your flipbook. Fonts.google.com is a great resource to know about. It allows you to type in your text, then preview what it will look like in all the different fonts simultaneously. Now remember, when you're in Slides or Docs or any of the other Google products, the font drop-down menu isn't going to display all of the available fonts. To access more fonts, you'll simply click on the font drop-down, select More Fonts, then check the fonts you want to add. Now that we have some planning out of the way, we are ready to start creating our flipbook. Before I jump into any design specifics, I wanted to mention that while I'm using Google Slides for this tutorial, these steps could be applied to any platform that you're comfortable working with. To create a flipbook, we're going to start by creating a brand new slide deck. You can go about this in multiple ways, but I'm partial to using the shortcut slides.new. The .new shortcut can be used with almost any of the Google products. Simply type in the product name, followed by .new to create a new file. The first thing I'm going to do is rename my file as Flipbook Template. If you have any type of organization system for your files in your drive, now would be a good time to go ahead and move your file into the appropriate location so that you don't forget. Next, we're going to adjust our canvas size by going to File, Page Setup, Custom. Make sure your measurements are in inches, then change the canvas size to 8.5 by 11. Anytime I sit down to design something digitally, I find it incredibly useful to sketch out a rough idea of what I want that project to look like on paper first. Now, don't worry, you don't have to be a great artist. In fact, here's a picture of what my sketch looked like. It really just is shapes and lines, but it helps me visualize the end product and decide on all of my measurements. Now, for this project, I knew I had 11 inches to work with, and I knew that I wanted 7 flaps. Well, I made it easy on myself and decided to have the visible part of each flap be 1 inch tall. Well, that took up 7 inches, which meant I had 4 inches left for the cover. In your planning guide, I've provided you measurements for a 4-inch cover and a 5-inch cover, as well as each flap size depending on the number of layers that you're including. To help you visualize what your end product might look like, I've also put together several layouts. They're arranged from easiest to create to most complex from left to right. This way, you can choose a layout based on what you feel most comfortable with and what you have time for. For each layout, I also included the sizes for everything based on 7 layers of content plus the cover. If you wanted a different number of flaps, you would simply change each layer's height. In the planning book, you'll find these tables for each of the layout designs. For this make and take, I'm going to walk you through the most basic flipbook, but if you're interested in more specifics on how I created the other layouts, stick around at the end of this video and I'll walk you through the extra steps. I'm going to work with 2 windows open. On the left-hand side, I'm going to have my table with all my sizes, and on the right, I'm going to have where I'm creating my flipbook. We're going to begin by adding a total of 8 blank slides. This building process takes a bit of a unique approach. We're going to create the entire flipbook on the first slide, then copy and paste our work onto the remaining slides, removing a layer each time. It may sound a little counterintuitive or confusing at first, but I promise it will make sense as we move further into the process. Now, because we're building everything on one slide, we need to start with the bottom layer and work our way up. Make sure that you're on slide 1, then go to the Insert menu and insert a rectangle by going to Shape, Shapes, and click on the rectangle. Click and drag to draw the shape on your slide. Really doesn't matter what size it is because we're going to correct that under the format options in the toolbar. Click to select your rectangle. My format options is under the More menu because I have my screen condensed, but yours may just simply be visible. Then I'm going to open the Size and Rotation dropdown. Based on my sizing table, we are building layer 7, so I'm going to make my rectangle an 8.5 by 11. To give my flipbook some depth, I'm going to change the border to transparent and add a drop shadow. To make my border transparent, I'm going to click on the pencil icon where it says border color and click transparent. Then I'm going to check the box for drop shadow. Now, if at any point you feel like I'm going too fast, please don't hesitate to pause or replay part of the video. That's one of the beauty of having this on YouTube is it puts you in full control of the experience. Next, let's add some color by clicking on the paint bucket icon. If you've already decided on a color palette, you can use the eyedropper to pick up your first color from your planning guide. So I'm going to pop back up to where I stored my colors. Then I'm going to click on the eyedropper and pick up my first color. And voila, your first layer is complete. To create the next layer, you're going to make sure your rectangle is still selected, and then use the keyboard shortcut Control D to duplicate it. You could also use Control C, Control V to copy and paste. Next, align the new rectangle with the top of your canvas and center it. This color makes it hard to see, but there are red guidelines that show you when your rectangle's in the correct place. I'm going to change the color real quick so you can see that. See, the red guidelines have popped up, which lets me know my rectangle's centered on the canvas. Then I'm going to change the height of my rectangle based on the measurements for layer 6 in my table. Since I have 7 layers, my height is going to decrease by 1 inch each time, so I'm going to change my height to 10 inches. After that, I'm going to change the color of this layer and repeat this process until I've completed all of my layers. Let me walk through one more with you. So select the rectangle, Control D, center the rectangle, decrease the height by 1 inch, and change the color. Here's what your finished product will look like. I've simply gone through and followed all of the measurements from layer 7 all the way up to the cover. Next, we're going to add our cover art, our layer titles, and any optional icons. I designed the cover art I just added in Canva, but you could also easily design directly in slides. You can add text by clicking Insert, Text Box, or you could use word art to give you more design flexibility. Using word art allows you to adjust the height and the width of your text, or you can create a layered effect using it. If you're interested in learning more about using word art, I encourage you to check out the Make and Take on creating custom Google Classroom banners. To add a layer title, I'm going to go to Insert, Text Box, and I'm going to draw a text box that's the same height as my layer. Then I'm going to click and look for the grid lines to show that it is centered on the canvas. For my titles, I chose to use the font Londrina Solid, size 42. I also center aligned it vertically and horizontally. I like to put in some filler text so I can see how it looks and make sure I'm happy with it. Then I'm going to click Control D to duplicate my text and add it to each layer. Again, I'm looking for that red grid line to show me that my text is center aligned. Next, to help viewers interact with the flipbook, I decided to add Clipart that signals the tab can be tapped or clicked on. Not everybody may be used to interacting with content like this, so I felt like a visual cue was really helpful. The Clipart I used in my flipbook was downloaded from Canva. If you want to learn more about how to create graphics in Canva or download them, check out the Make and Take on designing digital stickers. I did choose to include the graphics in the planning guide, so if you want to use these, all you have to do is click, copy, and paste into your own flipbook. If you're wanting to bring in your own graphics, you're going to click Insert, Image, then you have the ability to choose where you want to bring your image in from. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resize my graphic. Then I'm going to click and drag it over to the right-hand side of my flipbook. Once I'm happy with it, I'm going to press Control D and add it to each layer. Next, we're going to link each layer to the appropriate slides that we've already created. This step is the most time-consuming part of the project, but personally, I think it beats printing, cutting, and stapling physical books every year. Once this is set up, all you have to do is make minor edits from year to year. Whenever I'm linking anything for an interactive slide deck, I like to make sure to link anything that people might click on. So for this project, we're going to link the colored layer, the text box, and the Clipart graphic. This ensures that no matter where somebody clicks, they're going to be taken to the correct slide. To link your content, you're simply going to click on the colored layer and press Control K. Type in the slide number that you want to link to, then click on where it says slide 2 or slide whatever number. Next, you're going to click on the text box and press Control Y. This shortcut is going to apply your last action. In this case, hyperlinking to slide 2, which is going to save you several steps. Then I'm going to click on the clip art and press Control Y again. Now, occasionally people will struggle with hyperlinking text. It's important to remember that you only want to click once to select the text box. If you double click twice, that's going to enable text editing instead. So if you see the blinking cursor, you've clicked one too many times. Simply click somewhere else on your screen, then try selecting the text box again. Now we're going to repeat this process for each layer. Just don't forget that you need to change which slide you're linking to before you use the Control Y shortcut again, or all of your slides are going to link to the same location. So let me demo that again. I'm going to click on the colored layer. This time I've selected orange. I'm going to press Control K, and this time I want to link to slide 3. I'm going to click to select. Then I'm going to select the text box, press Control Y. You'll see that it's linked to 3. Click the clip art, and this one is also linked to slide 3. After all your linking is complete, we can start creating the other pages of our flipbook. Press Control A to select everything on slide 1, then press Control C. Then click on slide 2 and press Control V. We're going to delete the cover and any of the elements associated with it. Go to slide 3, and again, press Control V to paste. And for this slide, we're going to delete the cover and all of the elements for layer 1. To select multiple objects at once, you can hold down Shift and click on each of the objects. And you'll continue this pattern, pasting and deleting until you reach the last layer. Once I've created a slide for each layer, I'm going to switch out the top layer's click here icon with a home icon so that viewers can easily return to the front of the flipbook. Again, I'm simply going to click on the graphic from the planning guide, click Control C, Control V to paste, going to resize, drag it into the correct spot. Then I'm going to press Control K to link it to slide 1. Now that this image has been linked, I'm going to click Control C again and add it to the remaining slides. Now you're ready to start adding content to each slide. Because your flipbook is digital, you can add voice recordings, videos, and images in addition to your text. For example, you might want to add a video where you give a tour of your classroom. Any of this content can be added through the insert menu. Once you've added all your content, the next step is to test all of your links in present mode. You'll want to go through and click on everything to make sure that it is linking to the appropriate location. Once you're happy with everything, it's time to finally share. I like to share by clicking on File, Share, Publish to Web. Click the Publish button, which will provide you with a link that you can share with your families. The Publish to Web link is automatically going to put your flipbook in presentation mode for anyone who views it. Now, this link is kind of long, so if your school allows link shorteners, you could turn this into a bit.ly or a QR code. And if you want to be really fancy, you could make up business cards that have your name, a Bitmoji, and a QR code and Bitly, which would be really easy to laminate, stick a piece of magnetic tape on so that your families could put it on their fridge and have access to that information year round. The possibilities are really endless with how you choose to get this information out to your families. And that's how you create a basic flipbook. You now have an engaging and interactive way to communicate with your families and get your year off to a great start. Not only that, but you now also have a template if you want to create flipbooks for your students. If you were interested in learning how I made adjustments to this base project to create my other layouts, stick around and I'll go over those next. Otherwise, thank you so much for participating in our August Make and Take. We cannot wait to welcome you again next time. Okay, here we go. Here's the extra session on how to create what I'm calling options 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to use the flipbook that we created earlier, and I'm going to just go down to slide 8. I'm also going to pull up the layer sizes for the layout we're creating. So for option 2, we're going to start out with that 8.5 by 11 colored rectangle as our base layer. For this, again, I made the border transparent and I added a drop shadow. For this design, I only added drop shadows to the colored rectangles and the cover. I didn't add them for the white rectangles. To create the white rectangle, select the one on your page and press Control D on your keyboard. Then you're going to change the size to 8.25 by 9.75. And I'm simply getting this number from my table. Switch the fill color to white. Then you're going to eyeball the placement so that you have approximately an equal amount of space at the top and the sides. There's going to be more space at the bottom because this is your flap. And of course, I want to remember to remove that drop shadow for my white layer. If you like the way it looks with the drop shadow, feel free to leave it. The benefit of this design is the white background allows for your text to show up more clearly, especially for certain colors. Let's move on to option 3. Again, we're going to start with that base of 8.5 by 11. Then I'm going to duplicate the rectangle, but with Control D and change the size to 8.25 by 10.75. For this design, I chose to remove the borders on all of my rectangles and only use drop shadows on the colored rectangles and the cover. Change the fill color of your second rectangle to black. Then use the grid lines to center your rectangle. Next, you're going to duplicate the black rectangle and change the size to 8 by 9.75. Change the fill color to white. Then eyeball it to where there is approximately an equal distance on the top and the sides, just like we did for option 2. For this design, the black was added for aesthetic purposes, and the white background increases the readability of your font. Option 4 is the most complex of the layouts I created, but I thought it was a lot of fun. This allows you the ability to have more text in a concise place because you have flaps on both sides. This is what's called a dual flip book. Now, if you look at the planning guide, each layer is going to have a minimum of 2 rectangles, a large colored rectangle and a small colored rectangle. Adding the white rectangle is optional. Again, like some of the other layouts, you can add this if you want to have a nice background for readability of text. Just like all the other designs, we're going to start building from the base. So for layer 8, our large rectangle is going to be 8.5 by 9.5. I'm going to click and press Control D to duplicate and change the size of the rectangle to 4.25 by 1.5. This rectangle is going to go in the bottom right corner of my canvas. Now, again, make sure that you've removed any borders from both your rectangles. And I want to only have a drop shadow on the small rectangle, so I'm going to uncheck the drop shadow for the large rectangle. Now you might have noticed I have a little bit of a white line here where these shapes don't exactly meet. So how I'm going to solve that is I'm going to click on the small rectangle, right click, order, send to back. Then I'm going to make the height just ever so slightly taller. Because this is now behind the large rectangle, this looks like one seamless shape. According to my table, I need to use the exact same dimensions for layer 7. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click to select both rectangles, then press Control D to duplicate. Drag to center align your shapes on your canvas, then change the color so it's easier to see where one shape begins and the other ends. Next, I'm going to click and drag the small rectangle over onto the left side of my canvas. And we've now created 2 layers. To create layers 5 and 6, again, I'm going to hold down Shift, click to select both rectangles, Control D to duplicate, center align, and change the color. My large rectangle for layer 6 needs to be 8.5 by 8 inches. And my small rectangle still needs to be 4.5 by 1.5. So all I need to do is simply click and drag my rectangle up. To create layer 5, again, hold down Shift, click to select both rectangles, Control D to duplicate, drag to center align, change the color, then drag the small rectangle over to the far right. And you'll continue this process all the way up until you reach the cover. Now, remember, these are just a few layout possibilities. The great thing about this project is that it allows for unlimited creativity. So feel free to play around and customize it to truly make it your own creation. Thanks for sticking around for this additional segment. See you next time.